I want to talk a little bit more about your background.
You know, it's interesting. Backgrounds are one of the single most core parts of the game. You have to choose one to make every single one of your characters. Every single character has a background, and somebody must go through the time of making a character and choosing one of their backgrounds. They have to consider how it goes into their backstory, they have to consider how it affects their character, and how many times do we just forget backgrounds? You choose one, you figure out your stats, and then, well, they're gone. They give you some proficiencies, they give you some languages, maybe you get a feature you basically never use, and then, boom, they're gone after that, and you don't consider them. Hardly ever do I actually see backgrounds come up, but they're so quintessentially interesting and fascinating, and I wish that they were more interesting in games. And I think there is a way to make them more core, but it takes a little bit of work from, well, the players and the DM. So let's talk about that. Play Your Role is a proud affiliate of Only Crits Dice. Check the link in the description for beautiful hard-edged dice sets as well as a coupon code in order to be able to get 15% off your next order. If you want amazing high-quality tabletop products as well as to support the channel, please go ahead and check it out. Enjoy the video. So what is it about backgrounds that makes them so forgettable? See, like I said, every single character has to choose one, and they do something very important. They give you proficiencies and language proficiencies, tool proficiencies, skill proficiencies, you know, proficiencies at the wazoo. So why is it they get so easily forgotten despite the fact that they're so important?
And what about the background?
Well, yes, they give you your proficiencies, but after that, they're just kind of gone. They don't really impact your character. You look at your sheet and you see your proficiencies, but they do not lead back to your background. And while yes, they are a part of your backstory, when you look at it and you choose, hey, I'm going to be an archaeologist. Well, why was I an archaeologist? The backgrounds don't tend to actually play into the class, and your class is far more important mechanically, and so the class will take a first and forefront. Yes, I might be an archaeologist fighter, but that fighter is what I do. It is much more forefront. When I make a roll, when I'm in combat, when something important is happening, the fighter is there. The archaeologist is just, well, flavor. And I love flavor, so it means a lot when I'm sitting here talking about the fact that the flavor really isn't that important in this scenario. So the backstories, the backgrounds, just end up being less than exciting, less than important. They fade into the background and nobody pays attention to them. And I wish that wasn't the case because they're very important. See, when you take into the fact the backgrounds and the classes, when yes, the class is more important mechanically, the class is your job. Your background is who you are. If I am an artisan, if I'm somebody who is making important products, that's what I've been doing for my life. And yes, I might be a warlock who has some secret backstory with a patron and I have these magical abilities. That is absolutely true. But being an artisan is what I am. That is what I've been doing. That is my passion. But once we start getting into adventuring and important stuff like that, the background goes under the wafer. And it becomes part of the background. But I wish it didn't have to be that way. And so when choosing a background, here is something that I specifically do when creating my character in order to make it much more important. It doesn't have to be important, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but I find it much more fun and evocative when it is. And what is it that I do? Well, when I make my choice to choose a background, I try and figure out how that background led to my class. You do not have to do this, but if you do, it leads to a much more intense thought on how to make that a part of your character. For example, one of my characters was a City Watch investigator. They were essentially a bounty hunter, and they would constantly go into different cities and hunt people down and find them and bring them into the law, or a lot of other times, bring them into the mafia, which he worked for secretly on the side.
Do a background check on him.
And so he would constantly go into those places, but it was because of his need to hunt people down that he became an artificer. He needed to be able to have the tools to hunt these people down, and he didn't have them before. So he began to learn how to create them, learn how to fashion these magical items which were not available to the public, and eventually started to use those to hunt people down. His background to his class. And I really think that is a very fun way of creating an important background. Yes, the background features are not that helpful. There's only a few that ultimately end up being incredibly helpful. I mean, how many times have we seen different people take survivalist backgrounds and be able to live off the land? And yeah, okay, that helps during travel, but how often do they really come up? But if you keep it in mind that your background led to your class, then there's a lot more chance of your background feature coming up. For example, I had that City Watch background, and it meant that I had some benefits while in a city. And so anytime that we had to go into a city and find somebody, I knew that that's what my character was made for. And so that feature just ended up coming up far more often. Do you see what I mean by that? when you use your background to lead into your character class, it becomes intrinsic to you. And it doesn't make it become, well, skill proficiencies and tool proficiencies and then you never think about it again. Because I think that's just a waste. 5th edition doesn't do a very good job putting it first and forefront. And yes, the backgrounds can a lot of the times lead to you choosing your bonds and flaws, and that's great, but honestly, I don't see many people use bonds and flaws. They're very helpful for new role players, but once you get into it, bonds and flaws can feel a lot more restrictive than helpful. And I personally don't ever use the bonds and flaws. So that section really just isn't very helpful. So when you choose your background, figure out how it leads into your class, and then keep in your mind that your background is probably a part of your motivation. If I choose to be an archaeologist, I'm probably out adventuring to learn more about history and find ancient ruins that probably have undead within them. Or if I have the City Watch background, then it's probably my job to keep people safe, and so that's going to be my main motivation. One other point you have to remember when creating a background is that it is important to your character's past, but you also can consider how you got into that background in the first place, and that'll help you create a backstory for yourself much more developed. For example, I keep using the artisan background, so you're a guild artisan. You have a trade. How'd you get into that? How did you develop that? Because in a world like D&D, a lot of the times the ways that you get into these different backgrounds or these different jobs is by somebody else helping you get into it. In the past, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these references and ability to go out and get different jobs. You got a job because you knew somebody, they were willing to train you on it, and you trained into it. So when you choose your background, you're choosing it because it was important to your intrinsic character. If you are a hermit, it is probably because you knew a hermit. Or if you're choosing to be a haunted one, it's probably because you were living in a place where it was very likely to become haunted. It is very easy to be able to connect this to your backstory if you figure out how it led you to that point. And if you could do that, it should work out pretty well and makes a pretty entertaining way of figuring out your backstory and background. Choose your background as a motivation, and it will help you, 1, figure out how to go forward into the campaign, and 2, help it not become something that isn't important. And if you can do that, hopefully you can create a pretty fun character at your table. So go out into the world, make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget to play your role. A huge shout out to all those divine bastards over on our Patreon that helped make this video happen. I'd also like to take an additional very personal thank you to BKBW, Diet Blue, Duplicolor, Malcadil, I hope I pronounced that right, Sassy Cat Productions, Sorit, Supreme Court, Tin Eye, and Void Mystic. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our patrons, and we are very thankful for your continued support. You guys are the absolute best, and I will never take your support for granted.